Some problems don't just happen once. They echo. No matter how much you grow, how many habits you change, or how much positive thinking you apply. There's that one challenge, maybe more, that keeps showing up. Different people, different cities, different times in your life. Same emotional charge, same frustration, same results. It's as if reality is coded to bring that exact situation to your doorstep. Over and over. And here's the part that shakes the ground beneath you. That repetition might not be a glitch. It might be the code, a hidden structure embedded in the very layers of your consciousness. You're not cursed. You're not unlucky. You're running a loop, a quantum recursion loop. These loops don't originate from fate, karma, or coincidence. They originate from uncollapsed thought forms, energetic blueprints that exist in potential, hovering in quantum possibility, until one of two things happens. You collapse them with focused awareness. Or you unconsciously energize them again and again, forcing them to materialize through the pathways of your life. This is not theory. It's architecture. Your mind is not just a thinker, it's a multidimensional projector. And every thought form you feed, every belief you accept, every suppressed emotion you bury becomes a pixel in the film reel of your experience. So when you wonder why the same betrayal keeps happening, or why money feels like a struggle no matter how hard you work, or why your confidence dissolves at the exact same point in every relationship, you're not failing, you're reliving, and you're reliving because the loop hasn't collapsed. Let's be clear. A thought form is not just a passing thought. It's a structure, a living imprint that exists in the field of consciousness. When left unobserved, it continues to replicate itself, automatically, silently, and with alarming precision, across time, space, and circumstance. These uncollapsed patterns pull you into déjà vu without warning. They're the reason why transformation feels short-lived. They're why your spiritual growth plateaus just when you feel you've turned a corner. You're not stuck in life. You're stuck in a recursion. That's what we're exploring today. How every repeating problem in your life is not just a psychological glitch, but potentially a quantum-level construct that needs your conscious interruption. Not healing, not positive reinforcement. Collapse. Once observed, it weakens. Once confronted, it cracks. Once collapsed, it can no longer replicate. This journey is not about becoming something new. It's about uncreating what keeps you trapped in repetition. It's about stepping outside of linear thinking and recognizing that time is not your captor, your unobserved thoughts are, and the moment you choose to view them differently. To examine the repeating problem not as a personal failure but as a signature of recursion. Everything changes. This is metaphysics. This is quantum cognition. This is personal liberation through energetic sovereignty. You will learn how these loops form, why they persist, and how to see the exact point where choice was replaced by automation. You'll understand why emotional patterns don't dissolve with logic, because they're entangled at a vibrational level that operates far below language. You'll see how unresolved timelines bleed into the now, causing spiritual interference until they're acknowledged. You'll also see how even your biggest goals may be encoded with looping thought forms, sabotaging them in the exact same way every single time. And then, you'll learn how to collapse them. Not suppress, not manage, collapse. Because the recursion ends only when the energy is observed deeply enough to break the automaticity. Every repeating issue is a chance to reclaim energy. Every stuck emotion is a clue. Every moment of pattern recognition is a portal. This is not a motivational talk. This is a recalibration of how you relate to the matrix of thought itself. This isn't just spiritual. It's structural. Today, you'll gain the vocabulary, the understanding, and the tools to spot these loops with clarity and dismantle them with precision. You'll move beyond symptom management and into the root structure that governs energetic repetition. Next, we will look at the signature of the recursion, the invisible algorithm that repeats until it's seen. We're starting with the truth that most never realize until it's too late. You could be stuck in a loop right now and not even know it. It begins quietly. A situation happens, again, and you brush it off as bad timing or just one of those things. The second time, you raise an eyebrow but rationalize it. The third time, the discomfort deepens. And by the fourth or fifth occurrence, you stop being surprised. You start bracing for it. Without knowing it, you've accepted the loop. There's no alarm to tell you you've entered one. There's no glitchy signal from the universe that screams, "You're caught." Instead, it repeats almost invisibly until your nervous system codes it as inevitable. That's the trap of quantum recursion. At its core, a recursion loop is a vibrational pattern reinforced by unconscious agreement. You've entered it every time you conclude, "This always happens to me." You reinforce it every time you say, "This is just how I am." You seal it every time you identify with the outcome. But why does it repeat? Not because of moral failure, not because of fate, but because the thought form behind it remains uncollapsed. Let's break this down. A thought form is a mental energetic construct. When you hold an idea long enough, especially one charged with emotion, it doesn't just sit in your mind. It exists in your energetic field. It gains inertia. Now, here's where the recursion begins. If the thought form carries unresolved emotion, fear, shame, resentment, it doesn't resolve by being ignored. It waits. And the universe, operating like a holographic feedback system, reflects it back through situations, people, and outcomes. That feedback isn't punishment. It's a signal. A quantum recursion loop is born the moment you don't see the reflection as signal. You experience the outcome but miss the energetic root. You react rather than observe. And in doing so, you energize the pattern again. Loop complete. Pattern reinforced. Thought form remains uncollapsed. This isn't philosophy. It's pattern architecture. Let's get specific. Let's say every few months you experience rejection, romantically, socially, professionally. The faces change. The scenes vary. But the core emotional event? Identical. You think, "I have bad luck." But what's really happening is this. There is a deep energetic thought form, seated long ago, that believes you're unworthy of acceptance. Maybe it came from childhood. Maybe from trauma. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the thought form didn't collapse. You didn't observe it when it activated. You didn't rewire it. You believed it and fed it. So now, through quantum recursion, reality keeps finding new ways to mirror it back. Why? Because until it's seen as a pattern, it controls your path. Because until you recognize it as non-essential to your identity, it masquerades as destiny. You might think you've changed because you read the right books or said the right affirmations. But if you didn't collapse the thought form, the loop didn't end. A loop doesn't care what you think. It cares what you energize. Here's the subtle part most people miss. Recursion loops don't just repeat emotionally. They repeat structurally. You may think you're meeting someone new, but if the dynamic is energetically aligned with your uncollapsed thought form, it's not a new situation. It's a new stage for the old loop. It's not the person that's repeating. It's the script. And that script is quantum in nature, self-replicating, self-enforcing, and self-sabotaging until observed. So how do you know you're in a loop? You'll notice situations that feel like déjà vu without reason. Outcomes that mirror past ones with uncanny similarity. Emotional reactions that feel automatic and overcharged. A feeling of powerlessness despite awareness. These are not coincidences. They're indicators of recursion. And here's the liberating truth. The moment you see the loop, truly see it without blame, without justification, it begins to weaken. Because the loop thrives on unawareness. And observation is collapse. Not observation as in surface-level attention. We're talking about energetic awareness, seeing the loop as a structure you participated in creating. That level of ownership is nuclear. It cuts the repetition not by effort, but by exposure. It shines light into the mechanism and breaks the cycle. The loop is not personal. It's structural. The moment you stop identifying with it, the moment you recognize it as an energetic program rather than an identity, you step out of the recursion. You don't fight it. You stop feeding it. You collapse it by becoming incompatible with it. Next, we will pull back the veil on what thought forms really are and how they echo through the quantum field of your experience like persistent signal tones across dimensions. And once you know what you're truly interacting with, you'll stop being surprised when the pattern shows up. you'll start recognizing it as a message, not a sentence. Thoughts don't just happen and vanish. Not all of them. Some thoughts become something more persistent, layered, and self-aware in a strange, subtle way. Not conscious like a person, but alive like a signal. Not visible like a memory, but structural like a frequency. This is where the concept of a thought form steps in, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a legitimate energetic entity that continues to influence your behavior, your decisions, your timeline. A thought form is not imagination. It's not wishful thinking. It's a framework built out of belief, emotion, repetition, and focus that begins to exist outside the moment of its origin. You may believe a thought disappears the moment it's forgotten, but reality doesn't work like that. The energetic structure of a potent thought, especially one combined with fear, trauma, longing, or identity, remains active, even if unremembered. Think of it this way: your consciousness is a transmitter. Your beliefs are the frequency. Your thought forms are the programs. Once a belief is accepted and paired with an emotionally charged thought, the pattern gets locked in. It doesn't require your conscious attention to operate. It becomes a background broadcast, and it keeps transmitting into the field until something interferes. Now here's the important part. These thought forms don't just influence you in the here and now. They echo across timelines. They reverberate through the multiverse, seeding variations of reality where that exact belief continues to play out, branching off into lives you could have lived, choices you almost made, identities you almost became. The repetition you see in your life, the same outcomes, the same emotional landmines, could very well be the result of a thought form projecting itself across versions of you. A pattern of unworthiness isn't just a problem you're trying to overcome today. It's an echo of an energetic agreement you made years ago that now exists in countless versions of your life. Some are visible, some aren't, but they're all resonating with the same thought form. You don't have to believe in alternate timelines to see how this works. You just have to understand that energy doesn't need your permission to repeat. It needs resonance. So if your present self is resonating with a thought form seated in fear, failure, or abandonment, then every version of your reality, across every layer of possibility, will begin to organize around that tone. Let's go deeper. When you say something like, "I'm not good enough," and you feel it, you reinforce it, and you repeat it, that thought doesn't fade, crystallizes. You may stop saying the words. You may forget where you picked them up. But the thought form exists as an energetic node in your field. Now that node doesn't just sit there passively. It acts like a magnet. It draws circumstances, people, and timelines toward itself. And here's the kicker: your future choices begin to align with it without you realizing it. Your logic might say, "I'm aiming for success," but the thought form you're carrying is anchoring timelines of repeated failure. This isn't about punishment. It's about alignment. The quantum field responds not to words or goals, but to energetic consistency. If your emotional blueprint contains unresolved belief structures, those become the architectural framework for your future experiences. A thought form is like a repeating broadcast from a forgotten part of yourself. It says, "This is who I am. This is what I expect. This is what always happens to me." The quantum field, impersonal and precise, responds, "Understood." Then it builds accordingly. That's why some people feel like they're chasing the future but dragging the past. Because they are. The thought form can't tell time. It only knows repetition. It only knows whether you've changed resonance or stayed loyal to the old energetic code. And if you haven't made a clear decision at a vibrational level to contradict the old programming, then it stays active. Not just in your thoughts, but in your timeline. People often wonder why some trauma patterns seem passed down through families, almost inherited. And while DNA and epigenetics have their place, there's another layer: shared thought forms. Children pick up energetic templates from the emotional climate of their parents. They accept them without analysis. And unless observed and disrupted, those templates become their own. Repetition begins. The recursion is seeded. Let's be precise here. A thought form becomes a quantum recursion loop when it goes unobserved. It's emotionally reinforced. It begins influencing choices across time. This feedback is interpreted as truth. This creates the illusion that reality is simply repeating itself out of chaos or misfortune. But no, the repetition is intelligent. It's patterned. It's broadcasting. It's using you as the anchor. This is why awareness is not just healing, it's power. When you begin identifying the structure of your most common inner narratives. When you start asking, what belief is shaping this situation? You start to see the thought form behind the curtain. And when you see it, you disempower it. Why? Because observation is the first step to collapse. Not because it fixes anything, but because it changes your resonance. You're no longer unconsciously broadcasting the same frequency. You've interrupted the transmission. And when the signal changes, so does the reality it builds. The quantum field isn't fixed. It's fluid, but it reflects with precision. So if your reflection is showing a repeated struggle, look to the thought form, trace the pattern, interrupt the code, because until you do, every goal, every healing, every success will contain the seed of the old loop. Next, we will explore how the act of observation isn't passive. It's catalytic. How your attention doesn't just witness reality, but changes its shape at the core. And how the single most overlooked power you hold is this. Where you place your gaze determines what collapses and what repeats. You've heard that energy flows where attention goes, but the truth runs deeper. In the realm of quantum mechanics, this is not just a metaphor. It's a foundational law. Particles remain in a state of possibility, waveforms of potential, until observed. The moment observation occurs, the wave collapses into a defined state. It becomes a particle, a decision, a location, an outcome. This is known as the observer effect, and it has staggering implications beyond physics. Because you, too, are observing all the time. Not just with your eyes, but with your consciousness, with your focus, with your emotion. Every repeating pattern in your life is a result of what has or hasn't been observed with sufficient depth. Let's be very clear. Pattern cannot collapse unless it is seen, not judged, not rationalized, not suppressed. Seen. Seen without resistance. Seen without justification. Seen without the illusion that ignoring it will make it disappear. In the absence of deep observation, the pattern continues to exist in a state of uncollapsed probability, playing out in subtle and not so subtle ways throughout your experience. This is not self-help rhetoric. This is energetic law. If you want to stop the loop, you must become the observer. But not just any observer. Precise one. Let's distinguish between two types of attention. Reactive attention, driven by emotion, caught in the story, seeking confirmation of what it already believes. Quantum attention, neutral, exact, focused on structure, not drama. Most people are locked in reactive attention. They feel a familiar problem arise and immediately jump into judgment, blame, or avoidance. That's not observation. That's recursion. Because when you react instead of observing, you feed the thought form. You energize the loop. You re-enter the algorithm. Observation must become non-reactive if you want to collapse the waveform. So what does this look like in practice? Start here. The next time you notice an old emotional trigger, stop everything. Don't try to change it. Don't try to understand it. Just look at it. Not the situation. Not the person. The structure. Look for the code beneath the event. Ask, what's the exact belief this is echoing? When did I first feel this feeling? What's the story I'm repeating right now? And then, watch it. Don't fight it. Don't edit it. Observe it like you're watching a recording of someone else's experience. Because in that moment, your attention is collapsing the wave. It's removing the probability space. It's ending the loop's ability to masquerade as truth. When the structure is seen clearly, it loses energetic coherence. It begins to dissolve. This is why avoidance keeps you stuck. Because avoidance is the refusal to observe. And refusal to observe keeps the waveform alive, keeps the recursion active, keeps the pattern looping. Your power lies in choosing what not to energize. Your liberation begins when you stop running from what needs witnessing. Let's bring this home. You are the observer. Your life is the feedback. Your patterns are the echo of what you've refused to collapse. Observation is not analysis. It is presence. It is meeting the pattern without judgment, so that it cannot continue to replicate unchecked. The observer effect teaches us that no problem is permanent unless it's reinforced. No thought form is dominant unless you give it attention without clarity. No loop survives when the structure beneath it is made visible. Next, we will break the linear lie. We'll expose how time is not what it seems, and why your past may be bleeding into your present through recursion signatures that stretch across multiple realities. Because until you see how nonlinear your existence actually is, you'll keep applying solutions that only work in straight lines, while your problems loop in spirals. Events come and go, and we mark them as past, present, or future. We treat time as a line. One event leads to another in a straight progression. School, job, relationship, challenge, goal. It makes sense to our logical brain. But reality doesn't operate on that kind of timeline. Not under the surface. Time isn't a straight arrow. It's a dimension, a construct, a field. And in this field, everything that has happened, everything that will happen, and everything that could happen exists simultaneously. So when a problem keeps repeating, it's not necessarily stuck in your present. It may be anchored in a version of your past that's still active in the now. Or it may be bleeding in from a probable future that's already been constructed based on your unobserved choices. Or it may be looping from a timeline you didn't walk, but one you continue to resonate with emotionally. Linear thinking cannot explain these patterns. It's not equipped to. And because most people interpret experience through a straight-line lens, they keep applying present-moment logic to quantum-level recursion. That's why the pattern doesn't break. Because the pattern didn't start where they think it did. And it isn't staying alive in the way they think it is. Let's break this apart. In nonlinear time, your life isn't unfolding step by step. It's unfolding in layers. What you perceive as now is the dominant layer, yes, but underneath it, there are residual layers of other nows. Past moments you didn't fully process. Future probabilities you've already emotionally engaged with. Timelines that your soul remembers even if your brain doesn't. These aren't just dreams or imaginings. They're active coordinates in your quantum field. And when a certain pattern keeps recurring, it's often because one of these layers is still transmitting unresolved frequency, feeding the now with information that doesn't belong to it. This is why certain situations feel heavier than they should. This is why you might meet someone new and immediately feel distrust, even though they've done nothing wrong. It's not irrational. It's interdimensional. Your system is registering a frequency match with a past betrayal, a future warning, or an alternate version of yourself that never healed. And that energetic echo is feeding into your now. Here's what's crucial to understand. In nonlinear time, healing the past can change the future. But more radically, healing the future can also change the past. That may sound paradoxical, but in a quantum system, everything influences everything. If you continue reacting to life from your current point in time only, you'll miss the other threads that are shaping the loop. You'll think it's all about the current event. But most likely, the current event is just a mirror reflecting deeper causes. Now let's go a level further. In a linear model, we believe an issue arises, gets triggered, causes pain, and must be resolved. In a nonlinear model, the pain may be surfacing because a solution already exists, and the loop is rising up to be collapsed. Meaning, the event you're facing isn't the start of a pattern. It's the exposure of it. The recursion already existed, you're just catching up to the signal. This opens a powerful shift in perspective. It means that your pain isn't an interruption. It's a messenger. It's telling you where your timeline is still fragmented, and offering you the opportunity to merge it back into coherence. But if you react to it as just another failure, another problem, another incident to be pushed away, you miss the message. And the loop continues. So how do you begin working with time differently? First, stop treating the past as fixed. Yes, events happened, but your emotional and energetic relationship with them is not set in stone. A memory that continues to trigger pain is not a fact. It's an active timeline. You don't need to forget it. You need to rewire your attachment to it. When you revisit a painful memory, observe how your body responds. Notice what emotion still charges it. That emotion is your anchor, and that emotion can be shifted. Once you shift the energy by breathing through it, witnessing it neutrally, or offering a new internal narrative, the loop loses its fuel source. Second, recognize that your future is not distant. Every time you envision a goal, fear an outcome, or anticipate a scenario, you are engaging with potential timelines. Some of those timelines begin to crystallize based on how often you revisit them emotionally. If your thoughts about the future are dominated by anxiety, resistance, or confusion, you are feeding recursion signatures, preparing a loop to repeat. You must begin treating your relationship with time as dynamic. Your past and future are not behind and ahead, they're embedded in your now. And if you continue to ignore their presence, you'll continue to suffer their influence. Third, understand that unresolved versions of you still exist. That child who was rejected, that teen who felt unseen, that young adult who failed publicly, they're not gone. They're active, encoded in your system as energetic clusters. And every loop you face today is connected to one or more of those unresolved selves. Until you recognize and reintegrate them, not just intellectually but energetically, the recursion remains intact. To begin working with nonlinear healing, ask yourself, what version of me is still influencing this reaction? What future version of me has already resolved this, and how can I embody their frequency now? What narrative am I believing that locks me into this time loop? These questions aren't mental exercises. They are field disruptions. They cause your current frequency to shift, and that shift opens a crack in the loop. That crack is enough, because once the recursion is no longer airtight, you can inject presence into it. Presence interrupts time, and interruption begins collapse. Next, we will explore the way emotion locks these timelines in place, how unresolved feelings are not just psychological but quantum, and why trying to let go doesn't work unless a certain condition is met. Because if time is nonlinear, and thought forms are structural, then emotion is the glue that keeps it all stuck. You've been told to let it go, to move on, to forgive, to stop caring, to rise above, to shift your mindset. But no matter how many techniques you apply, no matter how many journals you fill, meditations you complete, or affirmations you repeat, the feeling remains. Maybe it hides for a few weeks, maybe it disappears for a month, but then it returns, as heavy as ever, because you didn't let it go. You disconnected from it without actually collapsing it. This is the hidden reason why emotional pain repeats. It's not a psychological residue. It's quantum entanglement. Let's get precise. Every emotion you suppress, every trauma you bypass, every wound you judge instead of witness, becomes entangled with the memory, the identity, the belief associated with it. Now that entanglement is not just metaphorical. It's real. In quantum physics, entanglement refers to the phenomenon where two or more particles become linked, such that the state of one instantly affects the state of another regardless of distance. That's exactly what happens when you suppress an emotion. You link the emotional frequency to the unresolved pattern. And from that moment on, any time the pattern is triggered, even slightly, the emotion returns. Instantly, without warning, without logic. That's why the feeling is so intense, so sudden, so overwhelming. You didn't just get upset. You activated the entanglement. This is why letting go doesn't work when done intellectually. You can't release entanglement by thinking it away. You must collapse the bond between the emotion and the thought form. And to do that, you need a different strategy. One that doesn't try to fix the emotion. One that witnesses it without judgment, until the bond begins to weaken. The process begins with acknowledgement. Not just, yes, I feel angry, but this anger has a structure. This anger is attached to a belief. This belief is attached to a memory. This memory has not been collapsed. Trace the string backward. Feel the emotion and then ask, what thought is this bonded to? Once you find the thought, ask, where did this belief originate? And once you find the origin, ask, what emotion was left unprocessed in that moment? This creates a feedback loop in reverse, allowing you to unravel the entanglement from the inside out. You are not doing this to analyze yourself. You are doing it to expose the structure, Because the moment the structure is seen with full, neutral awareness, the entanglement weakens. The emotion begins to move. The loop begins to collapse. This is the core mistake people make. They try to override emotion with logic. But emotion doesn't respond to logic. It responds to presence. You must sit with the emotion without the story. Not because the story is unimportant, but because the story keeps the emotion stuck. It justifies it, fuels it, it loops it. Presence, raw, clear presence, allows the emotional energy to decouple from the narrative. And once it decouples, it begins to release. Letting go isn't a decision, it's a consequence. It happens automatically when the emotional entanglement is no longer being fed. You'll notice this shift not as an explosion, but as an emptiness. A sudden neutrality. A strange quietness where the trigger used to be. That quiet isn't numbness. It's release. It's collapse. And once the emotion is no longer entangled with the thought form weakens. It becomes less magnetic, less influential, less real. The recursion begins to fall apart. This is emotional sovereignty. You no longer wait for the world to stop triggering you. You become aware of the quantum structures you've been tied to, and you begin undoing them from within. Emotion is not your enemy. It's your signal. It's the echo of energy trying to move. Next, we will explore the feedback loop itself, the way your reality keeps mirroring your internal state, and how the entire world around you might be reflecting back the uncollapsed code you still carry. Because once you see the mirror for what it is, you'll never take your external reality at face value again. Look around you. The circumstances, the dynamics, the results you're living through, they aren't just events. They're responses, reflections. Your life is mirroring you, and not just in some poetic, abstract sense. We're talking about a real-time, interactive feedback loop that is structurally responding to your internal frequency. This is where the idea of the universe as a holographic feedback system becomes more than a concept. It becomes the very reason the loop persists. You're not experiencing reality. You're experiencing your own signal reflected back at you through people, choices, and seemingly external forces. When the same kind of problem keeps repeating, despite your efforts to change, you are not stuck in the world. You're stuck in the reflection of your own broadcast. A looped response to an internal code that hasn't been altered at its root. And this is the part that's most misunderstood. Reality doesn't mirror your intentions. It mirrors your resonance. You can say the right affirmations. You can think positive thoughts. You can visualize success. But if your underlying frequency hasn't shifted, if the emotional field behind your words still carries fear, doubt, or old programming, the mirror doesn't reflect the surface. It reflects the signal underneath. This is why personal transformation fails when it stays on the surface. You don't change your reality by decorating your thoughts. You change it by adjusting your energetic architecture. And here's how the feedback loop works in action. You hold a belief. That belief generates an emotional signature. That emotion reinforces the belief. That internal state is projected outward. Reality reflects back a version of itself that matches. You interpret that reflection as proof. The belief gets stronger. The loop continues. This is the mirror effect in full motion. You don't realize it's a mirror because the reflection is disguised as circumstances. But circumstances are not as external as they appear. They are shape-shifted echoes of your own unobserved blueprint. Let's take a simple example. Say you carry a deep-rooted belief that people don't value your work. You may not say it aloud. You may not even consciously believe it anymore. But if that belief still exists energetically, it generates a signal. Now your behavior adapts around that signal. You may hesitate before speaking. You may hold back your creative ideas. You may expect rejection and subtly sabotage opportunities as a result. Then what happens? You get overlooked. You feel unseen. You watch others get chosen. And now the mirror confirms what you feared. You conclude, this always happens. Not realizing you're responding to a reflection of your own entangled loop. You're not unlucky. You're not cursed. You're interacting with a mirror you forgot you were standing in front of. And until that internal code changes, the mirror won't lie to you. Can't. It's built to be honest, even if that honesty feels brutal. So how do you break the mirror? You don't smash the reflection. You don't beg it to change. You shift what's being broadcast. You stop reacting to the surface and begin interrogating the structure. Ask, what is this reality reflecting about my belief system? What emotion is this situation showing me that I haven't resolved? If this is a loop, what pattern am I repeating that invites this experience back? These questions aren't just introspective. They're disruptive. They challenge the loop. They slow it down. They begin to short-circuit the autopilot. And as soon as you break the default reaction, the mirror adjusts. Not eventually, not someday, immediately, because the mirror isn't responding to effort. It's responding to alignment. Let's make this practical. If you want your external life to change, your first task is not to take action. It's to identify what the current feedback loop is built on. What's the unspoken expectation? What's the assumption you keep proving? What's the identity you're carrying that keeps attracting the same roles, the same stories, the same endings? These answers aren't found in the intellect. They're found in the emotional echo. Trace the pattern back to the feeling that started it. That's where the reflection was first programmed. That's where the recursion script began. Now here's the shift most never make. They keep asking the mirror to change. They argue with it. They plead with it. They try to force new results through willpower. But none of that works. Not sustainably. The only thing that breaks the mirror is this: becoming a version of yourself who no longer matches the reflection. You must interrupt the match. If you feel unworthy, and reality keeps sending you confirmation, stop trying to earn your worth externally. Start noticing the version of you who already knows they are. This version exists, but you haven't tuned to them yet. You're still reacting to the loop, and that reaction keeps the loop alive. Here's the deeper insight. Loops don't persist because they're powerful. They persist because they're familiar, and familiarity creates resonance, and resonance creates reflection. You must disrupt the familiarity. Do something different, not in the world, in the way you see the world. Shift your default lens. Replace the internal script. The loop isn't held together by logic. It's held together by agreement. Break the agreement, and the mirror has nothing to reflect. This is where the feedback loop ends. Not through force, through frequency. Next, we will reveal what happens when that reflection isn't just reinforcing you, but pulling from versions of you that made different choices. Versions that didn't heal. Versions that still carry the loop. Because some of your stuckness isn't just yours. It's the pull of a timeline that refuses to collapse until it's acknowledged. Not every part of you lives in the present. Some versions of you never left the past. Some versions split off entirely, holding the trauma, carrying the regret, locked in the loop that you thought you escaped. These are not just memories. They are energetic echoes, active, operational, influencing your now in ways you can't fully measure. You've met the shadow timeline every time you feel a pull into an old pattern without reason. You've sensed it when you make a different choice and feel like something unseen resists it. You've encountered it in those moments when you succeed and sabotage it, not because you want to, but because part of you doesn't believe it's allowed. This is the shadow timeline at work. A version of you exists that never broke the loop, and that version still runs code in your field. Let's break this open. When a major emotional event occurs, especially one you don't process fully, your consciousness can fragment. You go on living. You grow. You adapt. You evolve. But the energy of the moment that wasn't felt, that wasn't healed, it doesn't vanish. It becomes a splinter. It continues to exist on a separate trajectory, a version of you stuck in the echo. Now that version carries the full weight of the unresolved thought form. And even though you move forward, the field still contains that energy, still reflects it, still resonates with it. You think it's you, but it's not. It's an uncollapsed branch of self, projecting unresolved loops back into your current timeline. This is why certain behaviors feel so stubborn. You try to upgrade your identity, but the shadow version doesn't agree. You try to align with a new vibration, but the echo from the other timeline disrupts it. You try to believe in your vision, but a quieter voice undercuts it before you even begin. You're not broken. You're split. The recursion loop didn't just continue in your life, it continued in your field. And now, that version of you, the one who failed or froze or gave up, still exists energetically, still influencing your now through the vibrational bleed. So how do you identify a shadow timeline? You'll feel emotional flashbacks that don't match your current reality. Sudden waves of doubt, fear, or shame without clear origin. A subtle resistance to success, peace, or connection. A repeating voice in your mind that feels older than your current self. This is not a personality flaw. It's a signature of timeline bleed-through. And here's the radical insight. That shadow version of you is not the enemy. It's not trying to sabotage you maliciously. It's trying to get your attention. Because until that version is seen, acknowledged, and reintegrated, it will continue looping. And as long as it loops, your life reflects its code. This is where energetic maturity begins. You must stop fighting the shadow timeline and start collapsing it. The process begins with recognition. You must recognize that the pain you feel now may not belong to your current self. It may belong to a younger version, a fragmented self, a timeline that never moved on. Once you recognize this, the work becomes clearer. You're not just shifting your beliefs. You're offering coherence to a part of yourself that was frozen in time. To collapse a shadow timeline, identify the version. Ask, when did this emotion begin? What event fractured my confidence, trust, or safety? Witness the loop. Ask, what decision did that version make about life or self that I no longer agree with? Offer resonance. Don't argue with that version. Sit with it. Let it feel the frequency of your present awareness. Let it feel the coherence of your new self. This is not imagination. It's energetic re-encoding. You are shifting the vibration of a timeline, not through fantasy, but through presence. As that version softens, the bleed-through lessens. The loop loses power. The recursion begins to destabilize. Because now, you're not fighting the loop from the outside. You're collapsing it from the inside by reintegrating the version that kept it alive. This is shadow work at the quantum level. You're not just healing your past. You're updating your timeline. And as you collapse the patterns held in these splintered versions of self, your field becomes clearer, more coherent, more whole. Reality reflects this instantly. Because when the loop is no longer being reinforced from unseen timelines, your now becomes truly sovereign. Next, we will break open the technique, the exact process you can use to collapse a thought form consciously. Not conceptually, not emotionally, structurally. Because now that you know what loops are made of, it's time to break their architecture. Up to this point, you've uncovered the mechanics. You've seen how loops form, how they persist, and how they bleed through versions of you that never evolved past their origin. But insight without application is incomplete. Understanding the loop gives you clarity. Collapsing the loop gives you freedom. It's time to collapse the thought form. Not emotionally, not conceptually, structurally. This is not a ritual. It's not a practice you do once and forget. It's a fundamental re-architecture of your signal. And it begins with one principle. A thought form collapses when it can no longer maintain coherence inside your field. That means the structure that held it together, the emotion, the belief, the expectation, has been disrupted. It's like pulling one crucial card from a house of cards. The rest doesn't just fall. It can't stand. To collapse a thought form, you don't need to overpower it. You need to find its cornerstone and withdraw agreement. Let's walk through the complete process. Step 1. Locate the loop's emotional core. You start not with the situation, but with how it feels. Patterns exist because energy has not been released. The release never happened because attention was never applied correctly. Ask, what feeling always shows up with this pattern? Where do I feel it in my body? How long has this feeling been familiar? This is not about fixing the emotion. It's about witnessing it precisely without flinching. Feel the structure, not the story. You're not here to justify. You're here to see. Once you locate the emotional core, you can identify the energetic weight that keeps the thought form stable. Step 2. Trace the belief that glued it together. Every emotional loop is attached to a narrative. Sometimes that narrative is hidden under layers of denial or coping, but it's always there like a spine under muscle. Ask, what belief keeps this emotion coming back? What do I assume is true every time this happens? What story am I still living as if it's absolute? This belief doesn't have to be dramatic. Often, it's something deceptively quiet like, I don't get chosen. I have to prove myself. I'm too much. People leave. Success costs too much. Nothing ever lasts. This belief is not simply a sentence. It's a vibration. It informs your reactions, your decisions, your posture in life. Once you locate it, don't argue with it. Don't affirm over it. Just witness it as a construct. You've found the code. Step 3. Deactivate the code with non-reactivity. The power of a thought form depends on your agreement. An agreement isn't always conscious. It shows up as reactivity. If you try to fight the loop, you validate it. If you fear it, you feed it. If you try to destroy it with intensity, you reinforce its weight. So instead, hold it in awareness like a scientist holding a specimen. Look at the belief. Let the emotion swell. And do nothing. Let it move. Let it tremble. Let it exist. This is the paradox of collapse. The moment you stop resisting the structure, you destabilize it. Why? Because you're breaking the resonance. You're refusing to match its frequency with reaction. You've stepped outside of the loop's field and are now observing it from a different octave. That octave is coherence. Step 4. Replace reaction with precise choice. This is the key turning point. Collapse doesn't mean erasure. It means replacement through choice. Ask yourself, what version of me does not believe this anymore? What action would that version take now? What emotional tone matches that timeline? The choice must be specific. It must exist in the body, not just the mind. Maybe it's speaking when you would have gone silent. Maybe it's resting when you would have performed. Maybe it's refusing to explain yourself. Maybe it's standing in certainty without permission. When you take this action, aligned with your higher coherence, you send a new signal. And that signal disrupts the code. This is how thought forms collapse. Not by defeating them, but by becoming someone they can't operate through anymore. Step 5. Confirm collapse by watching the mirror. Reality updates fast. Once the thought form collapses, the feedback loop will begin to shift. You'll notice emotional triggers that used to activate you no longer grip. People stop responding to you in the old dynamic. Opportunities arise that reflect your new signature. You feel strange peace where tension used to live. This is not temporary. Unless you re-energize the old loop through repetition, the collapse is permanent. The energetic node no longer transmits. The recursion ends. But you must stay alert. If you revisit the belief, even subtly, the loop may attempt to restart. If that happens, don't panic. Just apply the collapse process again. Quicker, cleaner, stronger. Each time you apply it, your field gets sharper. Each time you collapse an old pattern, the feedback loop becomes more aligned. This is how reality gets rewritten. One collapsed thought form at a time. Next, we will examine how even your biggest dreams and goals, your manifestations, can be hijacked by loops masquerading as desires. Because if you haven't cleaned the template, you're projecting your loops into your future and calling them vision. Feels exciting. A new vision, a bold goal, a fresh affirmation. You say it. You write it. You visualize it. You feel energized until weeks pass and nothing changes. Or worse, you get what you wanted and it collapses. It arrives full of friction, tension, delay, loss, and the dream that once lifted you becomes another disappointment to recover from. This isn't failure. This is looped manifestation. A desire projected from an uncollapsed thought form is not a vision. It's an echo. You're not manifesting the future. You're replicating the past, dressed in better branding. The problem isn't your technique. It's your template. Let's get specific. When a thought form still exists in your field, unobserved, unresolved, uncollapsed, it hijacks the signal of your intention. You may think you're calling in love, success, or freedom, but underneath you're broadcasting lack, fear, or desperation. And the quantum field responds not to your surface-level command, but to the dominant frequency underneath. So what shows up? Not your vision, your vibration. This is why the same types of clients appear. The same kind of romantic pattern resurfaces. The same emotional outcome repeats, even though the packaging has changed. The loop hasn't been broken. It's just been painted gold. This is the trap of unconscious manifestation. When you desire something from within a loop, that desire gets shaped by the loop's architecture. Carries the tone of compensation. You're not creating from clarity. You're creating from reaction. Let's break this down. You think, I want success. But if the thought form still says, I'm not enough unless I'm validated, then the energy of your goal becomes corrupted. You pursue success not as an expansion but as a remedy for the wound. That's not creation. That's recursion in disguise. And even if you achieve it, the wound remains. Or worse, it deepens because the external cannot resolve the internal distortion. So how do you know if your manifestation is looped? Watch for these signatures. The desire feels urgent or panicked. The outcome must look a certain way to feel valid. You feel crushed by delays or detours. Your vision energizes your stress more than your peace. The same emotional disappointment keeps appearing, despite new actions. These are indicators that the thought form is still broadcasting and has embedded itself in your manifestation channel. To correct this, you must purify the signal. That doesn't mean stop desiring. It means upgrade the frequency of your desire. And to do that, start by asking, what emotion do I expect this outcome to resolve? What belief am I still holding that this goal is meant to fix? Who am I trying to become? And who do I believe I currently am? When you answer honestly, you begin to separate vision from recursion. You begin to see where your desires are entangled with past pain. And once you see the entanglement, you can start detaching from it. This is the moment of creation. Not when you visualize, not when you speak affirmations, but when your internal signal becomes clean enough to send a message the field can respond to without distortion. True manifestation is not asking, it's broadcasting. And the field doesn't respond to begging. It responds to coherence. So if you want to manifest the next version of your reality, you must become incompatible with the old loops trying to project themselves forward. This means collapsing the thought form behind the emotional hook, replacing identity-level doubt with energetic certainty, no longer needing your manifestation to validate your worth. When this happens, desire becomes light, focused, peaceful, magnetic. You're no longer chasing reality. You're commanding it not through effort but through resonance. This is not fantasy. It's structure, and your results will shift accordingly. The manifestations that once resisted you will find you, not because you pushed harder, but because the signal finally matched the timeline you were aiming for. Next, we will confront the external system that benefits from your loops, the cultural and collective forces that are designed to reinforce your recursion, and how to stop being a node in a pattern that was never yours to begin with. The loop isn't just personal, it's systemic. Your mind may carry the thought form, but the world around you amplifies it, reinforces it, normalizes it, even monetizes it. Because while you work on breaking your inner recursion, there's something else happening. The environment, cultural, social, informational, is structured to keep that recursion alive. This is not abstract theory. This is observable reality. You are surrounded by mechanisms designed to perpetuate unresolved thought forms. From the news cycle to advertising, from generational trauma to religious conditioning, from educational systems to entertainment narratives. You are being fed loops that didn't originate with you. But if you're not fully conscious, you start living them as if they were your own. This is loop farming, the industrial-scale seeding of thought forms into the population. And whether you realize it or not, you've been harvested, fed beliefs, injected with fears, primed with expectations that guarantee repetition. Let's look closer. Media as a recursion engine. You wake up and check your feed. A headline, catastrophe. A comment thread, outrage. a viral post, fear, judgment, moral panic. The emotional signature of your morning has been hijacked before you've even remembered who you are. That's not news. That's narrative farming. And the goal isn't awareness, it's repetition. Because emotional reactivity ensures attention, and attention ensures influence, and influence sustains the loop. When you see fear-based content repeatedly, you unconsciously begin to expect disruption. That expectation becomes a thought form. That thought form invites matching experiences, and the recursion accelerates. You're not just reacting to the world, you're looping with it. Every emotionally charged broadcast is a potential loop seeder, and unless you hold full sovereignty over your nervous system, it enters you. Silently, efficiently, repetitively. Cultural programming as loop template. From birth, you are given roles: boy or girl, strong or soft, obedient or punished, productive or lazy, valuable or invisible. These roles are not just social, they are energetic constraints. When you internalize cultural programming, it becomes the blueprint for your decisions. You don't choose paths, you follow scripts. And those scripts often carry embedded thought forms that have nothing to do with your essence. You end up carrying shame that isn't yours, fears that were inherited, aspirations shaped by comparison, not clarity. And the more you succeed within the cultural framework, the deeper the loop goes. Because now the system is rewarding the repetition. But what it's rewarding is your compliance, not your alignment. Break the role and the feedback shifts. Disrupt the expectation, and the loop starts glitching. This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. This is choosing presence over programming. Because cultural loops don't need your belief, they only need your participation. Withdraw that, and the structure begins to unravel. Intergenerational trauma as loop conduit. Some loops are older than you. They were born in your bloodline, breathed into you by those who came before, encoded in silence, in shame, in pain never spoken aloud. These loops often live below language. They show up as instincts, as irrational fears, as reactions you can't explain. You're not imagining it, you're hosting it. And the moment you refuse to carry it forward, the pattern resists. You may feel guilt. You may feel like you're betraying something sacred. That's not your intuition. That's the loop's defense mechanism. Intergenerational trauma survives by disguising itself as loyalty. It says, if you leave this belief behind, you're abandoning your family. If you heal this wound, you're rejecting your heritage. If you succeed beyond this threshold, you don't belong anymore. These are lies. They are loop logic. And they dissolve the moment you recognize them as such. You're not here to carry what your ancestors could not heal. You're here to collapse it, so the future stops inheriting recursion. Consumerism as loop amplifier. Look at how products are sold to you. You're not thin enough. Buy this. You're not strong enough. Take that. You're not secure enough. Sign up for this. You're not happy enough. Download that. These messages don't introduce new problems. They reinforce old ones. They identify unresolved thought forms and offer temporary external remedies. And in doing so, they keep the recursion profitable. As long as you feel unwhole, the market wins. As long as you stay stuck in comparison, the algorithm thrives. As long as you seek healing through purchase, the loop remains untouched. Consumer culture doesn't solve the loop. It anesthetizes you from feeling it. And in that numbness, the pattern grows stronger, breaking the systemic loop. So how do you stop being loop farmed? You start by recognizing that not every thought is yours. Not every emotion originates from your soul. Not every dream was born from alignment. You must become a filter, not a sponge. This means curating your information intake, cutting off media designed to trigger survival patterns, questioning narratives that rely on fear to function, interrogating your goals for hidden programming, observing your reactions to see what belongs and what was implanted. You don't need to reject the world. You need to become immune to its unconscious patterns. And that immunity begins with one choice. Stop feeding the loops that don't serve your timeline. You'll know which ones they are. They feel heavy. They sound familiar. They operate like background noise that shapes your day before you've made a single conscious decision. Shut the loop down by refusing to react. Respond instead from coherence, not compulsion. This is real freedom. It doesn't come from escaping the system. It comes from being in it and no longer obeying its false signals. Next, we will explore how a future version of you has already solved the loop, and how you can borrow their energy to create timeline fusion, not someday but now. You've been told that the future hasn't happened yet. But in the quantum framework, that's not exactly true. Every possible future already exists as probability, and the one you experience will match the resonance you hold now. That means somewhere, a version of you has already transcended this loop, already collapsed the thought form, already made the decisions that restructured their field. That version is real, not as fantasy, not as imagination, a signal, and you can connect to it. This is timeline fusion, the intentional merging of your current self with the energetic imprint of a future version who has already aligned. Let's walk through it. Step 1. Identify the loop you're ready to end. You must choose precision. This is not about vague desires. This is about exact disruption. What loop are you still in? Be specific. Name it. Is it scarcity? Rejection? Proving your worth? Collapsing under pressure? Trust issues? This must be clear because the version of you who exists beyond that loop carries a completely different code, and you must tune to it consciously. Step 2. Describe the post-loop version of you. Don't think in fantasy terms. Think in energetic reality. Ask, what does this version feel like when they wake up? How do they respond when faced with pressure? What do they no longer believe? What decisions are now effortless for them? How do others treat them? Not because of manipulation, but because of reflection. Now feel the gap. Notice where your current self resists. That's the loop's last grip. Your work is not to eliminate the resistance. Your work is to make the frequency of the future version more real than the pattern you're trapped in. That version is not a goal. It's a beacon. Step 3. Fuse identity through choice. Fusion doesn't happen through visualizing. It happens through exact action. Take a moment and ask, what would the post-loop version of me do right now that I normally wouldn't? What conversation would they stop tolerating? What risk would they no longer see as dangerous? What default habit would they no longer justify? Then do that. Don't prepare. Don't rehearse. Don't wait. That action is the bridge. That's what collapses the loop because now you're behaving in contradiction to the thought form. And contradiction breaks coherence. The loop cannot survive when you become someone who no longer feeds it. Step 4. Stabilize the fusion through repetition. You can't just visit the future version of yourself. You must stabilize as them. That means making choices before certainty appears, feeling emotions from the new timeline, refusing to react in the old ways, building new default responses that match your chosen self. Repetition is key not as habit but as calibration. The more you live as if the loop has ended, the less gravity it has. Eventually, it becomes like an old outfit, one you wouldn't wear, even if someone paid you, because it no longer fits your signal. Step 5. Witness the merge. You'll notice subtle signs of fusion. You speak differently, not forced, just clearer. People respond to you as if you've changed because you have. You feel peace during moments that used to trigger panic. You notice time feeling different, more elastic, more fluid, less oppressive. You no longer scan for threat, you scan for truth. This is not magic. It's alignment. You're no longer dragging the future toward you. You're anchoring it now. The loop ends when the post-loop self becomes more dominant than the pre-loop identity. And in this way, the future rewrites the past. You didn't escape the loop through effort. You collapsed it by choosing the version of you who had already transcended it, and aligning again and again until the shift became permanent. Next, we'll bring it home. We'll explore what life looks like beyond the loop, not in theory but in actual structure, and how to hold your reality in a state of clarity so that the loops don't reboot when no one's looking. There comes a moment after the observation, the collapse, the fusion, the detachment, when the loop no longer runs the show. You wake up. and something is missing. Not a loss, a silence. The noise is gone. The old gravitational pull, the emotional vortex, the mental clutter, the fear-based anticipation, no longer drags you backward. This is not luck. This is not temporary relief. This is what it feels like when the recursion is gone. Welcome to the quantum reset. It's not a new beginning. It's a restoration of signal. A re-entry into your original frequency before thought forms, before timelines, before conditioning, before split identities. This is where clarity lives. Not as a fleeting insight, but as a baseline. Not as a breakthrough, but as a normal state. And yet, this space is not automatically safe. Not because it's dangerous, but because your system has never been here for long. It doesn't yet recognize stability without chaos. So the reset requires maintenance. It requires a conscious agreement to live without the loop. Because if you don't commit to alignment, the mind will go searching for the next familiar pattern. Not because you're broken, because the nervous system seeks familiarity. And loops, even painful ones, offer structure. The reset breaks that structure. And now you are free but unstructured. That's why this phase is the most critical. You're not trying to grow anymore. You're learning how to hold. Let's map it out. Step 1. Recognize your new baseline. The absence of the loop might feel strange at first. You don't feel the usual fear before taking a risk. You don't hear the critical voice when you speak your truth. You don't enter conversations with tension. You're not overthinking your decisions. And because you're not constantly reacting, you start noticing how quiet everything seems. This is not emptiness. It's coherence. But you have to name it. Otherwise, your mind may interpret it as boredom or vulnerability, and seek drama to fill the space. This is why many people self-sabotage after a breakthrough. They misinterpret peace as stagnation. So remind yourself, this calm is real. This stillness is not a warning sign. I'm not waiting for the next problem. I've stopped looping. Naming the reset anchors it. And anchoring prevents regression. Step 2. Choose reinforcement over repetition. Now that the loop has collapsed, you don't need to relearn the lesson. You need to reinforce the upgrade. This means practicing your new identity even when no one's watching. Making default decisions from alignment, not strategy. Letting the new frequency express through your actions. This doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency without hesitation. You are building new loops, but these are loops of coherence, not collapse. You're repeating peace. You're normalizing ease. You're allowing success to feel natural. And every time you respond in alignment with your new self, you reinforce the reset. You encode it into your system. It becomes not just something you know, but something you are. Step 3. Watch for loop echoes. Even when the recursion ends, faint echoes may linger. They don't come with full emotional intensity. They arrive like a shadow thought, a whisper of doubt, a flash of an old identity, not to test you but to reveal where there's still residue. These echoes are not setbacks. They're audit signals. Their job is to highlight places that haven't been fully re-encoded yet. Don't react to them. Thank them. Say, that's the old loop speaking. I've collapsed this, and I choose differently now. This thought isn't mine anymore. This keeps you sovereign. Because sovereignty isn't about having no noise. It's about knowing what signal to respond to and what to let pass without engagement. Step 4. Redefine success without recursion. Most people define success within a framework of struggle. Work hard, grind, sacrifice, achieve, prove. All based on proving something to someone or escaping something internal. That model doesn't work here. You've reset. So your new metrics must reflect a new reality. Ask, does this decision match my natural frequency? Am I creating from overflow or from lack? Is this choice clean or reactive? Success in the post-loop reality is about coherence. Your nervous system doesn't spike. Your energy doesn't leak. Your intuition doesn't argue with your strategy. You feel inner permission to stop explaining yourself. You know something is right because it feels complete before it arrives. This is how success stabilizes without effort. You're no longer chasing, you're receiving without distortion. Step 5. Protect your frequency without isolation. You may notice your social world shifting. Some people don't recognize you anymore, not because you've changed on the surface, but because your signal no longer matches their expectations. This isn't personal. This is vibrational filtration. You're no longer in the loop, so looped connections may dissolve. You may feel a brief sense of disorientation, but let it pass. You're not alone. You're just unentangled. And from here, you begin attracting resonance, not familiarity. You don't need to isolate to maintain the reset. You simply need boundaries. Your boundaries are no longer protective fences. They're calibration tools. You use them to preserve clarity, to hold alignment, to communicate what you're available for and what you no longer match. This isn't ego. This is field maintenance. And it keeps you loop-free. Step 6. Build without loops in the blueprint. Every creation carries the signature of the one who builds it. So when you build a relationship, a business, a creative work, it will echo your current field. Make sure your new creations don't contain seeds of old loops. Ask, am I doing this to be chosen, or because I've already chosen myself? Is this structure built from fear of scarcity, or trust in flow? Does this expression require performance, or does it come from truth? Build as your post-loop self, not as the healed version of your wounded identity, as the original version that never needed the wound in the first place. When your creations reflect that frequency, they last, they scale, they serve, not because of force, but because they are clean signals in a noisy world. Step 7. Teach through frequency, not strategy. You don't need to convince people you've changed. Your field speaks louder than your words. And from this space, your very presence becomes a transmission. People feel different around you, not because you try to lead, but because you broadcast clarity. This is the ripple effect of reset. Others may not know what happened, but they'll say things like, "You feel different. You're not carrying that edge anymore. You look more real somehow. I don't know what it is, but I trust you." That's not charisma. That's coherence. And it teaches by example, not instruction. You become a living interruption to the looped reality around you. And that's how systemic recursion begins to collapse, one coherent being at a time. Step 8. Reset as a way of life. You don't arrive at the reset once. You live in it. You treat every tension as a potential loop signature. You notice early. You act clearly. You choose the future version of you before the old one has a chance to reanimate. This doesn't mean you don't feel pain, fear, or doubt. It means those signals no longer define your next move. You've exited reactive living. You've stopped agreeing with unresolved patterns. You've begun living from the space after the loop. This is the reset in action. Not a place, not a technique. A new baseline reality. So here you are. No longer held by inherited shame. No longer echoing thought forms that don't belong in your field. No longer reacting from unconscious trauma blueprints. The loop is no longer you. You are no longer it. You've collapsed it, observed it, rewritten it. You've reset. Now your life begins to mirror something radically unfamiliar. Freedom without resistance. Growth without drama. Clarity without explanation. Power without aggression. Joy without debt. There's nothing left to prove. Only signals to refine. Only truths to embody. Only timelines to walk, cleanly, consciously, and on purpose. You are the recursion breaker. You are the field recalibrator. You are the origin point now. And from this state of reset, you don't just live a new life. You shape new laws of what's possible for you and for those who feel your signal. You've stepped beyond the loop. Stay there.